The sun in the New Mexico territory didn't just shine, it laid on a man's shoulders like a judgment. It was the 1870s, and the land was a cracked, alkali white plate waiting for the next meal. Eli Mercer felt it cooking him right through his flannel shirt. He rode hunched, a habit he'd picked up back in Texas, letting his horse, Bess, do the choosing through the scree and brittle bush. He was scouting, looking for a thin line of water, a patch of grass, anything that might get the herd through. The cattle were getting thin back at the main camp, and the men were getting mean. This route was a risk, cutting close to the canyons, but the old way was dry as a bone. Eli was a quiet man. The noise had been burned out of him 2 years prior. On a job near the Pecos, he'd trusted a foreman named Silas Cade, a man who smiled with his whole face and shared his whiskey. Silas had also shared their route with rustlers for a cut of the profit. Eli was the only one who'd walked away, carrying 3 dead men's wages in his pocket and a hole in his trust so big you could drive a wagon through it. He hadn't spoken more than 10 words in a stretch since. He trusted the ache in his knee when the air got cold, and the solid weight of the Colt at his hip. He did not trust men. Bess snorted, pulling him from the memory. He patted her neck, feeling the sweat-caked hair. "Easy, girl. Just a little further. See that notch?" He was looking at the notch, a V of shadow in the high rocks. When the world exploded, the sound was a flat crack, too loud for the empty air. Eli felt the heat of the bullet pass his ear, and then a second impact, a heavy, wet thud. Slammed into his left side, it felt like being kicked by a mule. He gasped, the air punched from his lungs. Before he could even draw his weapon, Bess screamed. It was a terrible, high-pitched sound that ripped through the quiet. She crumpled beneath him, hit in the chest. Eli was thrown clear, landing hard on his wounded side. The pain was immediate and white-hot, stealing his vision. He rolled, pulling the Colt, fighting the stars in his eyes. He saw them then. 3 men, maybe 4, stepping out from the rocks, rifles aimed. They weren't soldiers. They were scavengers, dressed in rags, their faces burnt black by the sun. "Got him!" one yelled, his voice thin. Eli fired. He saw dust kick up near one man's feet. He tried to aim again, but his arm felt like it was lifting a boulder. The whole world was tilting. His side wasn't just hurting, it was burning, and the front of his shirt was dark and sticky. A third shot hit the rock beside his head, sending stone chips into his cheek. He wiped the blood away, his hands shaking. They weren't trying to capture him, they were just killing him. "He's done," another voice said. Eli tried to push himself up, to say something, to fight, but the blood was running too fast. He watched, helpless, as they walked over. One of them kicked the Colt from his hand. Another knelt by Bess and pulled Eli's Winchester from the scabbard. "Good rifle," the man muttered. The first man nudged Eli with his boot. "What about him?" "He's dead, or he will be. Son'll do it. Get his belt. And his boots. Those are good boots." Eli felt them rough handling him, pulling his boots off. The pain in his side was a dull, sick ocean now, pulling him under. They took his canteen, emptied it onto the sand, and laughed. Then they were gone. The silence rushed back in, heavier this time. There was only the sound of his own breathing, ragged and wet, and the slow, final sigh of his horse. He lay there for a long time, watching the patch of blue sky above him. The betrayal he'd felt with Silas was a cold anger. This was different. This was just waste. After an hour, or maybe it was just 10 minutes, the thirst came. It was worse than the pain. He had to move. He gritted his teeth, pressing his hand against the wet hole in his side. He managed to get to his knees. His boots were gone, and the rocks were already hot enough to blister. He didn't care. He crawled past Bess, touching her flank one last time. "Sorry, girl." He stood up. The world swam. He picked a direction, away from the sun, and he walked. He didn't know how long he walked. The desert blurred into a red-brown haze. He fell, got up, fell again. The pain was a living thing, a passenger on his back. His thirst was a fire in his throat. He tore a strip from his shirt and tried to tie it around his ribs, but his fingers were clumsy. He started seeing things, a shimmer of water on the rocks that turned to dust when he got close. He saw Silas Cade, clear as day, standing on a ridge, waving his hat. Eli cursed him. The sound, a dry croak. He was just a piece of meat, drying. He knew it. He found a shadow, a slight overhang of sandstone that offered maybe 3 feet of shade. It was enough. He slid down the rock, his back scraping raw. He didn't have the strength to crawl under it, only to fall into it. He closed his eyes. The darkness was a relief. It felt cool. He let himself sink into it, thinking it was the last thing he'd ever feel. He woke to voices. He thought it was the bandits, coming back to finish the job. He tried to move, but his body was lead. The voices were sharp, spoken in a mix of Spanish and something else he didn't recognize. He managed to open his eyes. The sun was lower, or maybe it was just blocked. Figures stood over him. They were not the bandits. One was a young man, barely 20, with a long scar down his cheek. He held a knife. "He's alive," the young man said, poking Eli's leg with his toe. "He's white. We should kill him now. He'll bring trouble." "He's half dead," said an older woman, her hands on her hips. "Look at him. He brings nothing but his own ghost." Then the figures parted, and she stepped through. Eli's vision was blurry, but she sharpened into focus. She was tall, standing with a stillness that silenced the others. She wasn't dressed like any woman he'd ever seen. She wore hide leggings, like an Apache, but a linen shirt that might have come off a settler's wagon. Her black hair was pulled back tight, and she wore a belt with a heavy knife and a revolver. She held a rifle, and she held it like she was born with it. Her face was brown, her eyes dark and unreadable. She looked regal, not like a queen in a palace, but like a hawk on a high branch. This was the Desert Queen. He'd heard whispers of her, a ghost who ran the ravines, leading a tribe of outcasts, half-breeds, and runaways. She stared down at Eli, her face a mask. He saw no pity there, no anger, just a deep, calculating quiet. The young man with the scar spoke again, bolder this time. "Sabine, he is an outsider. Remember the rule." Sabine didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on Eli. She knelt, getting close. He could smell sage on her, and dust, and something sharp, like curing leather. She looked at the blood caked on his shirt, the raw scrape on his face, the blisters on his feet. He tried to speak. "Water." He breathed. Her expression didn't change. He watched her eyes. He'd seen eyes like that before, in men who had seen too much, in animals caught in a trap, weighing the cost of chewing off a leg. "He's done for," the young man insisted. "A waste of water." Sabine was silent for a long moment. Eli felt his life hanging in that silence. She looked at his wound, then back at his face. He didn't know what she was looking for. He didn't know what she found. "No," she said. Her voice was low, rough, like stones rubbing together. It was the voice of command. "He doesn't die today." She stood. "Thomas, you and Paz carry him." The young man, Thomas, looked stunned. "To the oasis? Sabine, he's a white man, a cowboy." "He is a man," she said, her voice cutting. "And I say he lives now." "Carry him." Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, but the look she gave him was as sharp as her knife. He stepped back, his face dark with resentment. Eli felt hands grabbing him. He cried out as they lifted him, the pain in his side tearing through the fog. He was slung between 2 men, his arms over their shoulders. He was a sack of grain. He blacked out again, but only in flashes. He remembered moving through rock. The passage grew narrow, a crack in the wall of the canyon so thin they had to turn sideways. It seemed impossible that it led anywhere. He smelled damp earth. Then the world changed. He was lowered to the ground. He heard the sound of a spring, the rustle of cottonwood leaves. The air was cooler, 10 degrees cooler at least. He forced his eyes open. He was in a deep ravine, hidden from the world. The walls rose 100 feet on either side, shading the floor. A thin stream of water trickled from the rock, pooling in a basin before vanishing back into the sand. Shelves and small caves had been cut into the rock walls, draped with hides and canvas. It was a fortress, a sanctuary. They laid him on a dry blanket in one of the lower alcoves. He was out of the sun. He was alive. He lay there, drifting, for what felt like days. People came and went. He saw faces, men, women, children, all mixed, all watching him with suspicion. But it was Sabine who stayed in his memory. She came alone. She brought water in a gourd and held his head, forcing him to drink. It was not a gentle act. It was practical. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice flat. Eli Mercer." "Who do you ride for?" "No one. Scouting. For a cattle drive." "Where?" He told her the rough location. She listened, her face giving nothing away. "You're lying." "No," he whispered. The effort to talk was too much. She tended his wound herself. She pushed the others away. He woke once to find her leaning over him, a knife in her hand. He flinched, but she was only cutting his shirt away. The cloth was stuck to the dried blood, and it ripped his skin. He hissed. "Be still," she commanded. Her hands were rough but sure. She cleaned the wound with boiled water that stung, and then pressed a dark, wet poultice of crushed leaves into the hole. The smell was bitter, but it cooled the fire. He watched her as she worked. She was focused, impersonal. She was not a nurse. She was a farrier, tending a lame horse she might still have to shoot. "Why?" he managed to ask, his throat raw. She didn't look up from her work, pulling a clean strip of cotton tight around his ribs. "You were dying. You saved me." She finished the knot, pulling it tight enough to make him grunt. She leaned back, wiping her hands on a rag. "I saved a piece of meat. It's not saved yet." She looked at his face. "I don't trust you. Eli Mercer, you are a threat to my people." "I'm not," he said. "I won't." "You are white," she said, as if that explained everything. "You are an outsider. Your kind brings dust and soldiers. You'll heal, and then I'll decide what to do with you." She left him. He lay in the twilight of the cave, the pain in his side a sharp, clean line now instead of a raging fire. He was a prisoner. He slept. When he woke again, the ravine was quiet. A fire burned low in the central pit, casting long shadows. He felt clearer. The fever had broken. He was stiff, sore, and hungry, but he was himself. He looked around the alcove. It was just rock, and his blanket, and her. She was sitting on a stool near the entrance, just outside the range of the firelight. She was sharpening her knife on a whetstone. The sound was a steady, rhythmic scrape. Shing, shing, shing. She wasn't watching him, but he knew she knew he was awake. "You're a long way from home, cowboy," she said, not stopping the knife. "Texas," he said. "This isn't Texas." He waited. The silence stretched, filled only by the sound of the stone. "You're the queen," he said. The scraping stopped. She looked up, her eyes catching the firelight. They were black. "I am Sabine. I lead this place. That is all. Your people, they wanted to kill me." "Thomas wanted to," she said. "Thomas is young. He sees a wolf. He wants to shoot it, even if it's already in a trap." "Am I in a trap?" "You're in my home." He felt a familiar, cold weight settle in his gut, the same feeling he'd had when Silas Cade poured him that last glass of whiskey. He was alive, but he was not free. He was in this woman's power, and she was suspicious, armed, and surrounded by people who hated him. He had to know. He had to know if he was a patient or a prisoner. Using his good arm, he pushed himself up onto his elbow. The movement sent a bolt of fire through his ribs. He grunted, his vision blurring, but he held on. He had to show he wasn't broken. "I need to stand," he said, breathing hard. "I need to walk." He swung his legs over the side of the pallet. His bare feet touched the cool stone floor. Sabine stood up. She didn't hurry. She just rose, like smoke. "I told you to be still," she said. "I can't just lay here." He pushed with his arm. trying to get his feet under him. He was weak, his head spun. He never saw her move. In one fluid motion, she was across the 6 feet that separated them. She shoved him, not hard, but with perfect balance, back onto the pallet. His head hit the rock wall behind him with a dull thud. Before he could catch his breath, the knife was at his throat. The blade she had just been sharpening, it was ice cold against his skin. He froze. He didn't dare breathe. She leaned in close, her body pinning his good shoulder. He could feel her breath, hot on his cheek. He looked into her eyes. There was no mercy there. There was only iron. She whispered, the sound a dry rasp, more dangerous than a shout. "You belong to me now." He stared at her, his heart hammering against his cracked ribs. "You don't walk out," she whispered, pressing the blade just enough to sting. "Until I say you do." The knife stayed at his throat for 3 long heartbeats. Eli didn't swallow. He didn't even blink. He just held her gaze, seeing the fire in her black eyes. Then, as slowly as she had moved, Sabine withdrew the blade. She didn't sheath it. She just held it, point down, at her side. "Stay down," she said, "until the wound is closed." She turned and walked out of the alcove, vanishing into the shadows of the ravine. Eli let out the breath he'd been holding. His ribs ached, a sharp, grinding pain. He was a prisoner, but he was alive, and he had learned long ago how to be patient. The days that followed were a blur of sun and shade, pain and a dull, constant hunger. He did not challenge her again. He stayed in the alcove, and when he was finally strong enough to stand without the world tilting, he stayed within the 10 feet of shade she had allotted him. He was a man who knew how to be quiet. The silence he had carried for 2 years served him now. He didn't ask questions. He didn't complain. He just watched. He watched the life of the oasis. It was a harsh life, built on scraping by. There were maybe 30 of them in all. A handful of hard-bitten men like Thomas, a dozen women whose eyes held the same sharp, guarded look as their queen, and a few children, rail-thin and quick as lizards. They were a tribe of scraps, of pieces that didn't fit anywhere else. He saw a black man, built like an ox, who spoke only in grunts and mended their leather work. He saw 2 sisters who looked to be Mexican, who managed the small, tough herd of goats that provided their milk and cheese. He saw the young boy, Paz, who seemed to be everyone's errand runner. And he watched Sabine. She was the axle on which their world turned. She decided who got what rations. She settled disputes with a single, sharp word. She carried a rifle everywhere, and he saw her practice at dawn, shooting at marks on the far canyon wall. She never missed. She was not a soft leader. She was a necessary one. Sabine, in turn, watched him. She would stand on a high ledge, pretending to scan the ravine's entrance, but he could feel her gaze on him. She saw that he didn't fight. He didn't pace like a caged animal. He accepted the small portion of watery stew they gave him. He sat in his patch of shade and listened. He learned the names of the children just by hearing them called. She noticed. It unnerved her. A defiant man. She understood. A begging man. She despised. A quiet, watchful man was a mystery. And she hated mysteries. One afternoon, she stood watching Eli as he sat propped against the rock wall. He was absently braiding a piece of stray twine, his hands, though scarred, moving with an unconscious, practiced skill. The sight of it pulled her back, sharp and sudden, to a time before the ravine, to a time when she was not Sabine. She had been a girl named Sarah, living in a sod house on the flat, empty plains of Kansas. Her father had been a hopeful man, her mother a tired one. She remembered the smell of bread baking and the feel of her brother's small hand in hers. Then, the raid. Not soldiers, not a known tribe, just men, painted and howling, their faces a blur of fury. They had come at sunset. They had wanted horses and guns. They had taken everything. She remembered the smoke, thick and oily, stinging her eyes. She remembered her father's rifle shot, and then the silence after. They had killed him. They had killed her mother. They had killed her brother. They had taken her. She was 9 years old. She rode with them for years. A possession, a slave. They were a mixed band of Kiowa and outcast whites, and they taught her their ways with a casual brutality. She learned to ride like them, to suffer thirst like them, to hate like them. The girl named Sarah died on that ride when she was 16. The man who claimed her, a hard-faced warrior named Crow, tried to break her to his bed. She waited until he was drunk, and she cut his throat with his own knife. She stole his horse and his gun and rode into the desert. Alone, she found this ravine by accident, following a dry wash, half dead herself. It was her sanctuary, and one by one, the others had found her. A woman named Alara, fleeing a husband who used his fists. Tomas, a boy she'd found starving, his Apache mother and white father both dead. The black man, Jonah, who had escaped a chain gang in Texas. Drifters, runaways, mixed bloods. They were her people. They were all broken pieces, and she was the one who held them together. She had built this outlaw community not on hope, but on a shared refusal to die. And her first, last, and only rule was simple. No outsiders, especially white men. They were the ones who had burned her first life to the ground. She looked at Eli. His head bowed over the twine. He was the enemy. He was the past. And yet, he was still breathing her air. She clamped down on the memory and turned her attention back to the present. He was healing. The gash in his side was closing, knitting into a puckered, angry scar. He was starting to limp around the small common area, his face still tight with pain. He still didn't push. He sensed the wall around her, around all of them. He knew he was the snake in their garden. So he made himself useful. In silence. One morning, the handle on the bucket they used to draw water from the deepest part of the spring snapped. It was their only good bucket. Thomas cursed and threw it down. Eli, limping, picked it up. He found the leatherworking tools Jonah used. He didn't ask. He just sat, and for 2 hours, he cut, stitched, and riveted a new handle, reinforcing it with a skill that was plain to see. He tested it, hissing as the strain pulled at his side, and then left it by the spring. He mended torn gear. He whittled a new pin for a goat's pen. He spoke only when spoken to. His answers short. Yes. No. I need water. Sabine tested him. She had to. She had to see where he would break. She set him to the worst jobs. The latrine trench is full, she told him one blistering afternoon, tossing a shovel at his feet. Dig a new one, on the east side. The east side got the sun all afternoon. It was baked rock and hard clay. It was a job for 2 strong men, not one wounded one. Eli just picked up the shovel and walked, limping heavily, to the spot. He worked for 6 hours. He didn't stop. Sabine watched from the shade. He dug until his hands were bleeding and his shirt was plastered to his back. He finished the job, and then collapsed in his alcove, sleeping for half a day. She isolated him. When the camp gathered for the evening meal, she motioned for Paz to take Eli's bowl to the alcove. He was not allowed to sit at their fire. He ate alone, listening to their voices echo in the ravine. She let Tomas whisper. The young man's hatred for Eli had only grown. He's a liar. Sabine, Tomas would say, loud enough for Eli to hear. He was scouting. That means a herd. That means men with guns. He's just waiting. He's counting us. Sabine would just nod, her face impassive. I'm watching him. Eli heard it all. He kept his head down. He kept working. He knew betrayal. He knew what it looked like when men got restless. He was just waiting for the knife to turn. The turning point came on a hot, still night. The air was so thick you could taste the dust. A dispute broke out near the goat pen. It was Tomas and the young boy. Paz, clumsy with exhaustion, had left a gate unlatched, and 2 of the goats had gotten out. It had taken an hour to chase them down. Thomas was furious. You stupid boy! That's meat! That's milk! What good are you? He shoved Paz hard. The boy stumbled and fell. I'm sorry, Tomas, Paz whispered, terrified. I forgot. You forgot. Tomas hauled the boy up by his shirt and raised his hand. I'll teach you to remember." He backhanded the boy across the face. The sound was a sharp crack. Eli was 50 feet away, mending a strap. He went still. He had been invisible for weeks, a ghost in their camp. But that sound broke his quiet. He dropped the strap and stood up. He walked over, his limp more pronounced because he was moving fast. "That's enough," Eli said. His voice was rough from disuse, but it cut through the night air. Tomas spun around, his hand still raised. He looked shocked. The ghost had spoken. "What did you say, white man?" "I said, that's enough," Eli repeated. He didn't look at Tomas. He looked at Paz, who was holding his cheek, tears welling. Eli stood between them. He was taller than Tomas, but thinner, weaker from the wound. It didn't matter. "This is not your business," Tomas snarled, stepping up to him. "This is tribe business. Get back to your hole." "The boy made a mistake," Eli said, his voice flat. "He'll fix it. You don't need to hit him. I'll do what I want. He works for me." "He's a boy," Eli said. "You raise your hand to him again, you'll answer to me." The camp went dead silent. This was more than a dispute. This was a challenge. Tomas's hand drifted to the knife at his belt. "You defend him?" Tomas sneered, his eyes glittering. "This little half-breed? Against me?" "I am," Eli said. He didn't move. He just stood there. A wall. "Tomas!" Sabine's voice cracked like a whip. She strode out from the shadows of the central cave, her rifle in her hand. Her face was thunder. Tomas instantly stepped back, his anger turning to frustrated deference. "Sabine! This outsider! He threatened me! He interfered!" Sabine looked from Tomas to Paz, and then to Eli. Her eyes were chips of ice. She was furious. He had overstepped. He had threatened the order she had built. "Go," she said to Tomas. "Go check the perimeter. But now!" Tomas shot Eli a look of pure poison, then turned and stalked off into the darkness. Sabine turned to Paz. "Go to Alara. Tell her to check your face." The boy scrambled away. Grateful? Now it was just Sabine and Eli, standing in the moonlight, the silent camp watching them. She stared at him for a long time. He had defied her lieutenant. He had spoken. "You had no right," she said, her voice low and dangerous. He was hitting the boy. "Tomas is my lieutenant. He keeps order." "That wasn't order," Eli said, his own anger stirring. "That was cruelty. I've seen enough of that." "You have seen nothing." She stepped closer to him, the rifle held low. "You come here. You eat my food. You drink my water, and you dare to tell me how to run my camp. You think because you are quiet, I don't see you. I see you. Eli Mercer, you are a threat. I'm just a man. Sabine, same as you." "You are nothing like me," she hissed. "Why? Why step in? He's not your blood. He's not your problem." Eli looked past her, at the canyon wall, bathed in silver light. The old, cold memory of Silas Cade rose in him. "I don't like seeing the strong hurt the weak," he said, his voice dropping. "I don't like bullies." "And you're not one," she scoffed. "All your kind. You're all bullies. You come with your guns and your fences." "I ride for wages," he said, turning his gaze back to her. "Or I did. I don't build fences. And I don't betray my own." "You don't?" She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You're lying." "No." His voice was hard. "I was betrayed. That's why I was alone out there. That's why I don't talk much." She saw the shift in him. This was not a defense. It was a scar. Speaking. "Who?" she asked, her curiosity overriding her anger. "A foreman, man named Silas Cade, back on the Pecos. I worked with him for a year, shared coffee, trusted him. He sold our herd and our route to rustlers. For $100. I watched him do it, watched him let them ride in. 2 men died, good men. I was the only one who got away, and only because they thought I was dead. 2. He was quiet for a moment, the memory fresh. "I've been alone since. Trust. Trust is something I can't afford, but I know what it looks like when it's broken. The mood between them changed. The anger was gone, replaced by something else, a heavy, charged stillness. The ravine, the camp, it all faded away. There was just the two of them, under the moon. 2 wounds exposed. Sabine looked at his face. She saw the lines around his eyes, the tightness in his jaw. He was telling the truth. It was a truth that echoed her own. She had been betrayed by the whole world. He had been betrayed by his... She found herself moving, stepping into his space. He didn't move back. He held his ground. She was close enough now to feel the heat coming off his skin. She looked at his mouth. "I will break you if you lie to me," she whispered. It was a threat, but it was also a plea. Eli looked into her eyes. He saw the fortress she had built, and he saw the girl, Sarah, trapped inside it. He wasn't afraid of her. He was tired, so tired. "Then break me," he whispered back. It was an invitation. It was a surrender. It broke her control. She lunged. It wasn't a soft movement. It was an attack. She grabbed the front of his shirt with one hand, slamming him back against the hard rock of the canyon wall. His head hit, and he grunted. Her other hand went to his hair, grabbing a fistful, yanking his head to the side. And then she kissed him. It was not a kiss. It was a brand. Her mouth was hard, demanding, trying to punish him, trying to take something from him. It was violent. It was desperate. It was full of all the rage and loneliness she had carried since she was 9 years old. For a second, Eli was too stunned to react. Then the pain in his side flared, and the shock turned into something else. He didn't fight her. He didn't push her away. His good arm came up, wrapping around her waist, pulling her in. He kissed her back. He met her violence not with more violence, but with a deep, aching hunger that matched her own. He wasn't trying to conquer her. He was just holding on. His lips softened against hers, a silent answer. The tenderness was what broke her. She ripped her mouth away from his, shoving him back. She was breathing hard, her eyes wide, shaken. She looked at him as if he had struck her. He just stared back, his own breath ragged, his lips stinging. She raised a trembling hand, as if to wipe the kiss from her mouth, but stopped. She was the queen. She was in control. She had to be. She took a step back, pulling the mask of command back over her face, but her voice was unsteady. "This doesn't make you safe," she warned him, her voice a low growl. "This doesn't make you one of us." She turned, grabbing her rifle. "It makes you mine." She walked away into the darkness of her cave, leaving him leaning against the canyon wall, his side throbbing, his mouth burning. That kiss hung in the air of the ravine like gun smoke. It was a thing that had happened, and it could not be taken back. In the days that followed, the space between Eli and Sabine grew taut. A wire pulled so tight it hummed. They avoided each other. It was a loud, clumsy avoidance. If Eli was working by the spring, Sabine would take the long path over the rocks to the goat pen. If she was in the central camp, he stayed in his alcove, mending gear he had already mended. They did not speak. They did not even look at one another. But every person in the camp felt it. The air had changed. The desert grew hotter. The sun was not a light. It was an enemy, a physical weight that pressed down on the ravine from dawn until dusk. The shadows, once cool and deep, shrank against the canyon walls. The spring, the heart of the oasis, slowed to a sluggish trickle. Tempers grew short. The children snapped at each other. The women's voices were sharp. The oasis, once a hidden sanctuary, now felt like a pot of water left on a fire, simmering toward a boil. The restlessness centered on Eli. He was the grain of sand in the oyster, the irritant, and Tomas was the loudest voice. His resentment for Eli had only hardened. The public challenge Eli had made, and Sabine's refusal to punish him for it, had curdled in Tomas's gut. He saw the tension between Eli and Sabine, and he named it for what it was. "He's infected us," Tomas said one evening, his voice loud enough to carry to Eli's alcove. He was speaking to Jonah and two of the other men. "He's a white man. I told her he would bring trouble." "He's just one man. Thomas," Jonah rumbled, his head down, working a piece of leather. "Wounded. He's a viper." Thomas spat. "And he's charmed her. Can't you see it? She's not the same. She let him defy me. She lets him walk free. He's put his poison in her, and it will kill us all. He'll lead them here, his kind. They'll come for him, and they'll take our water." The other men murmured. They were afraid. The heat, the low water, it made them superstitious. Eli was a bad omen. Some of Sabine's lieutenants, men who had followed her for years, began to watch Eli with cold eyes. They wanted him dead. They wanted the curse removed. Sabine heard the whispers. She knew her authority was being questioned. To prove she was not soft, to prove that the kiss had meant nothing, she became harder than she had ever been. She drove her people relentlessly. She cut rations, punishing Paz for spilling a cup of water. She sent Tomas on a 2-day scout in the blistering heat with almost no canteen. And to Eli, she was brutal. She gave him the worst work, tasks meant to break him or drive him off. He was to haul rocks from a fallen scree pile to reinforce the goat pen. It was grueling, mindless work. His wound, still healing, ached constantly. But he did it. He didn't complain. He just hauled the rocks, one by one, his face a mask of sweat and dust. His silence was, to her, a constant accusation. Every time she looked at him, she remembered his gentleness. She remembered his mouth, and it made her furious. He was hauling a heavy piece of sandstone, his breath hissing through his teeth. When the world changed, it did not start with wind. It started with silence. A deep, unnatural stillness fell over the ravine. The insects stopped. The goats stood frozen, their heads turned to the west. Eli lowered the rock, wiping sweat from his eyes. The sky was wrong. It was not blue. It was a sick, yellowish gray, a bruise. Sabine was on the high ledge, the lookout post. She saw it first, a low, dark wall on the horizon. It looked like a mountain range, rising fast, but it was not rock. It was dust. "Sandstorm!" Her voice was not a shout. It was a roar. It cut through the heavy air. "Shelter, now! Tie the goats! Paz! Elara! The cistern! Cover it!" The camp exploded into panicked, practiced action. This was a familiar terror. People ran, grabbing water skins, pulling canvas over the food supplies. The wind came. It was not a breeze. It was a shove. The air, moments before still, was filled with a low moan. Eli looked to his alcove. It was shallow, offering little protection from a real storm. He'd be buried or scoured raw. Sabine was shouting orders, her hair already whipping across her face. "Jonah, the upper caves! Thomas, get the children in the deep holds!" She saw Eli, frozen, exposed. He was the last one in the open. Her duty warred with her pride. Her duty won. "Mercer!" she bellowed, pointing to her own cave, the deepest and most secure shelter in the ravine. "In here, now!" It was not an invitation. It was a command. He didn't hesitate. He ran, limping, across the open ground. The first stinging wave of grit hit him, hard enough to feel like needles. He reached the cave mouth just as Sabine slid in behind him, pulling a heavy, cured buffalo hide across the entrance. The hide snapped taut, and then the sound hit. It was not a wind. It was a solid thing, a deafening, constant roar, like a freight train that never passed. The world outside the cave was erased, replaced by a screaming, scouring, yellow-black chaos. The ground itself seemed to vibrate. Inside the small cave, the sound was muffled, but it was still everywhere. It was the only thing. Eli pressed his back against the far wall, his heart hammering. Sabine stood near the hide, her hand on it, feeling the impossible force of the wind. Her cave was larger than his alcove, deeper. It was her home. A bed of furs lay in one corner. Weapons hung from wooden pegs. A small chest sat in the back. It smelled of her, dried sage, leather, and the faint, metallic scent of gun oil. And it was small, too small. They were trapped. For the first day. They did not speak. There was nothing to say. The storm was too loud. They sat on opposite sides of the cave, 2 animals in a hole. Waiting. Sabine rationed a small amount of water from a skin she had, giving him the first drink. He tried to refuse, but she just shoved it at him. They ate dry strips of goat jerky. The tension from the past week was still there, but now it was compressed, trapped in the dark, vibrating space with them. The storm did not stop. It screamed all through the night. It screamed all through the next day. The height at the entrance was covered in a drift of fine, penetrating dust. It was in their mouths, their eyes, their hair. On the second day, the roar outside seemed to find a new, higher pitch. They had not slept. Sabine spoke first. Her voice was rough, barely audible over the howl. "You think you know me now?" It was not a question. It was an accusation. Eli looked at her. Her face was a pale shadow in the gloom. "I know you're human," he said, his own voice dry. "You know nothing." She stood up, pacing the tiny space. 3 steps one way, 3 steps back. She was a caged wolf. That night, that was a mistake, a moment of weakness. "It wasn't weakness," he said, standing up to face her. The cave was too small for both of them to be on their feet. It was a moment of truth. "Truth," she laughed, a bitter, harsh sound that was swallowed by the storm. "You think you're my savior? You think because that happened, you've saved me. I don't want to save you. You're just a man," she spat, her anger rising. She was angry at the storm, at him, at herself. "Like all the others, you want to take, you want to own. You think because I let you, you think you own me now. Like he did." She stopped, her hand flying to her mouth, but it was too late. The name she had not spoken in years was in the air. Eli went still. "He, the man who raised me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "After they killed my family, the one I killed to get free." She was shaking. She had never told anyone, not Jonah, not Ilara. But in the dark, with the world ending outside, she had told him. "Sabine," he said, taking a step toward her. "Don't," she commanded, backing away until she hit the wall. "Don't, you see? You pull things from me. You make me weak." "That's not weakness," he said, his voice pleading. "That's trust. Trust!" She shoved him. Hard. "Trust is what gets you killed. Trust is what burned my home. Trust is a lie. You and your soft words, you're quiet, you're worse than all of them. You're a sickness." She shoved him again. "I hate you. I hate you for coming here. I hate you for making me—" He caught her wrists. She struggled, but he was stronger, and he held her. "Stop," he said, his voice firm. "Stop fighting. I'm not him. I'm not Silas Cade. I'm not the man who hurt you. I'm just Eli." She froze. They stood, chest to chest, breathing hard. His hands were on her arms. The roar of the storm was the roar of the blood in their ears. He could feel her trembling. Or maybe he was the one trembling. "You, let me go," she whispered. But there was no command in it. He didn't. He looked at her mouth. She looked at his. She was the one who moved. She lunged, not in anger this time, but in a desperate, raw need. Her mouth found his. It was the same kiss as before. Hard, hungry, a crash of 2 worlds. She was trying to climb out of her own skin, to escape the memories, to escape the storm. But this time, Eli was ready. This time, his gentleness was a shield. He didn't fight her. He didn't meet her violence. He just held her. He held the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her dusty hair. He held her waist, pulling her body against his. His lips were not demanding. They were an answer. He took her rage and her fear and her pain, and he simply absorbed it. He met her raw, desperate hunger with a slow, quiet certainty. It broke her. The fight went out of her. Her hands, which had been pushing at his shoulders, crept up, clutching his shirt. Her mouth softened. The kiss changed. It was no longer a battle. It was a dismantling. He eased her back, away from the wall, toward the bed of furs. He never broke the kiss. It was a slow, walking retreat, their bodies flush. He lowered her down, following, his weight settling over her. She looked up at him in the dim light. Her eyes were wide, terrified. She was the desert queen. She was in control, and she was completely, terrifyingly out of control. "Eli," she breathed, her voice a plea. He didn't answer with words. He kissed her throat. He kissed the scar on her shoulder. His hands were rough, calloused, but his touch was agonizingly gentle. It was not the touch of a man taking. It was the touch of a man finding something he thought was lost. She unbuttoned her shirt, her hands shaking. He pushed the cloth aside. He was slow. He was patient. When they finally came together, it was not a clash. It was a sinking, a relief. It was two broken, jagged pieces, finding a way to fit, even for a moment, in the middle of a screaming world. After they lay in the dark, the storm still raged, a forgotten thing. Eli held her, his arm under her head, her back pressed against his chest. He was staring at the wall, his heart slowing. Then he felt it, a small, silent tremor, a wetness on his shoulder. Sabine was crying. She made no sound. It was not a sob. It was a silent, terrible weeping, her shoulders hitching, the tears flowing hot onto his skin. She was crying for the girl named Sarah, for the family she'd lost, for the man she'd killed, for the fortress she had built that had just been breached by a wounded cowboy. Eli's arm tightened around her. He held her. He didn't speak. He didn't offer comfort or platitudes. He just held her, bearing witness, letting her break. Outside, the storm raged. The wind finally died on the third day, settling into a low whine, then silence. A silence as profound as the noise had been. When Sabine finally moved, pulling the hide back, the light was blinding. The world was new, scoured clean and buried under 3 feet of pale, fine dust. The oasis was changed, but it had survived. The camp slowly emerged, blinking, dazed. Life resumed. But the tension between Eli and Sabine was gone, replaced by a new, fragile, terrifying connection. Sabine was more distant than ever, as if trying to rebuild her walls in the open air, but her eyes kept finding him, and he felt like he finally had a stake in this place. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat in his alcove, staring at the moon, which was sharp and bright in the clean air. He felt a restlessness he couldn't name. He saw a shadow detach itself from the rock near the main gate. Someone was sneaking out of the ravine. His first thought was Sabine, but she was in her cave. He knew, because he had been watching it. He stood, his instincts, long dormant, screaming. He slipped out of his alcove, keeping to the shadows. He was stronger now. His side barely ached. He moved with the quietness she had taught him. He reached the narrow passage. The figure was ahead of him, a ghost in the moonlight. Eli followed. He followed the figure for a mile, out of the ravine and into the open, broken land beyond. The figure stopped at a cluster of mesquite, crouched down, and waited. Eli took cover behind a shelf of rock, his heart cold. 10 minutes later, riders appeared, 3 of them. They were white men, dressed in trail dust, heavily armed, bounty riders. Eli saw the man in the mesquite stand up. The moonlight hit his face. It was Tomas. "You're late," Tomas said, his voice sharp. "Wasn't easy." One of the riders said, "This storm? You got the money?" "I'll have it." Tomas said, "When the job is done. The job is, you lead us in." The riders said, "We take the woman. We kill the cowboy. The rest, we'll see. But the price for the woman is $500. And we want the cowboy. Eli Mercer. There's paper on him from Texas. 100, dead or alive." "He's mine," Thomas said, his voice full of venom. "The cowboy is mine. The woman, you can have, but she's smart. She won't be taken easy. We'll be ready." The rider said, 2 days. At dawn. We're bringing 10 more men. You make sure that entrance is quiet." "It will be," Tomas said. "Now go." The riders turned and trotted away. Tomas waited until they were gone, then melted back toward the ravine. Eli's blood was ice. He had been betrayed. Sabine had been betrayed. He ran, scrambling over the rocks, back to the ravine. He went straight to her cave. She was standing outside, under the stars. She looked startled to see him so agitated. "Sabine, we have a problem." "What?" "It's Tomas. He's a traitor." He laid it out, fast. What he saw, what he heard, the riders, the bounty, the attack, planned for 2 days from now. Sabine listened. She did not move. Her face, which had been soft in the moonlight, turned to stone. She stared at him, and her eyes went cold, colder than the knife had been. "No," she said. "Sabine, I heard him. I saw him. No." She took a step back, shaking her head. "You're lying." "Why would I lie? He's bringing men to kill us all." "You're lying," she repeated, her voice flat, dead. "You're trying to save yourself. You want me to turn on my own. Thomas is loyal. He's been with me for 5 years. He hates you, but he is loyal to me." "He's not," Eli pleaded. "He's selling you for $500. You hate him." She shot back. "He challenged you. This is your way of getting rid of him. You're using what happened in the storm. You're using it to poison me." The words hit him harder than the bullet had. She didn't believe him. She couldn't. To believe him would be to admit her entire world, her judgment, was wrong. She trusted the man who had been with her 5 years over the man who had been with her 3 days in a cave. The trust wasn't there. Not all the way. He was still the outsider. Eli looked at her. He saw the queen, back on her throne, the walls a mile high. He saw the girl, Sarah, terrified of being betrayed again. And he was tired. He was so tired of it. "Fine," he whispered. The frustration and the pain were a bitter taste in his mouth. "You believe what you want. You believe him. But I won't be here for the bullets. I've seen this before. I won't be the last man standing again." He turned his back on her. "Eli," she said. Her voice was small. He stopped, but he didn't turn around. "Don't go," she said. "You've left me no choice." He walked to his alcove. He gathered his few things: the mended shirt, the waterskin, the small knife she had given him to mend leather. He was leaving. Sabine watched him from the center of the camp. She did not move. She said nothing. Her face was a mask of cold, hard pride. But in the shadow of her cloak, her hand gripped the hilt of her knife, and it was trembling. The dawn came in shades of gray and cold, bruised purple at the edges. Eli Mercer stood at the mouth of the ravine, a waterskin over one shoulder, the borrowed knife at his belt. He hadn't slept. He had spent the night watching the rock wall of Sabine's cave, waiting for her to come out, to say she was wrong. She had not. Now, he was leaving. He looked back, just once. The camp was still, huddled in the pre-dawn chill. He could see her, a shadow standing near the dead fire, watching him. Her pride was a fortress, and he could not, or would not, lay siege to it. He had been betrayed by trust once before. He would not be betrayed by his own hope a second time. He turned his back on her, on the oasis, and began the long walk up the narrow passage that led to the outside world. Each step was a wrench. He was walking away from the first place that had felt like anything in 2 years. He was walking away from her, but he kept walking. He reached the top of the pass, where the canyon walls dropped away to the open desert. He was free. He took a deep breath of the sharp, cold air. The shot was a flat crack that echoed, amplified by the rocks. It was not a single shot. It was a volley. Gunfire erupted from the mouth of the ravine, a chaotic, ripping sound. Shouts, screams, not from the attackers, but from the camp, from his camp. Eli scrambled to the edge of the cliff, his heart seizing. He looked down. It was a massacre. Thomas was there, just as he'd said, but he wasn't with 3 men. He was with 20. Hired men, bounty riders, their faces hard and mean, pouring into the ravine's choke point, firing as they came. Chaos. Jonah, the big leather worker, fell in the first volley. clutching his chest. Ilara grabbed two of the children, shoving them toward the high caves. But a bullet caught her in the leg, and she went down. The goats were screaming. Men were firing from the ledges, but they were outnumbered, outgunned, and taken by surprise. "Sabine!" Eli roared, though she could not hear him. He scanned the fight, his eyes desperate. He saw her. She was not running. She was not hiding. She was on her horse, her black bay, rifle in hand. She burst from her cave, firing from the saddle. A warrior queen. She didn't ride to join the defense. She rode at them. She screamed, a high, piercing cry of pure rage, and charged the main line. Straight at Tomas. The attackers faltered, surprised by the sheer fury of one woman. "She's drawing them off," Eli breathed. He saw her plan instantly. She was trying to draw their fire, to lead them away from the caves where the women and children were hiding. She was sacrificing herself. She broke through their line, bullets kicking up dust all around her, and wheeled her horse toward a secondary pass. Eli was safe. He was on the cliff. He could walk away. They didn't know he was there. He could save himself. He looked at Sabine, one woman against 20 guns, and he thought of Silas Cade and the men who had died because no one had helped. He cursed, a low, vicious sound. He turned back. He didn't go down the pass. He ran along the rim of the canyon, his feet sure on the rock. He knew this ground now. The attackers were focused on two things: the defenders hidden in the rocks, and Sabine's desperate, suicidal ride. They were not looking up. He moved until he was directly above the thickest knot of men. The group led by Tomas. He still had his knife. He slid down a fissure in the rock, landing silently on a ledge just 10 feet above them. "Spread out!" Tomas was yelling. "She's trying to circle. Harris, you and 2 men cut her off. The rest of you, sweep the caves. I want the cowboy. Mercer!" "You got him," Eli said, and he dropped. He landed square on the back of a rider, his knife driving down, once, into the man's neck. He rolled clear as the man fell, grabbing the dead man's pistol from his holster. "What?" Tomas spun, his rifle coming up, his eyes wide with shock. "You!" Eli fired the pistol. The shot went wide. Tomas lunged, not with his rifle, but with his own knife, closing the distance. He was fueled by a betrayal of his own, a hatred that had festered for weeks. They slammed into each other, rolling in the dust and rock. This was not a fight. It was a butchering. Tomas was younger, stronger, his fury making him fast. He slashed Eli across the arm, the blade cutting deep. Eli grunted, kicking out, catching Tomas in the knee. Tomas roared, raising his knife for a killing blow. Eli didn't try to block. He drove his head forward, a brutal headbutt that connected with Thomas's nose. There was a wet, crunching sound. Thomas screamed, reeling back, blood pouring from his face. It was the opening Eli needed. He surged up, inside Thomas's reach. He didn't use the knife. He used his hands. He grabbed Thomas's head, his thumbs finding the man's eyes. "You sold her!" Eli roared, his voice raw. She chose you!" Thomas gurgled, blood in his mouth. Eli shoved him back, picked up a rock, and brought it down on Thomas's head. Once, twice. The fight was over. Eli staggered to his feet, breathing in great, ragged gasps. He was covered in Thomas's blood. He grabbed the man's rifle and cartridge belt. He looked for Sabine. The diversion had worked. Half the riders had chased her. He saw them now, in the secondary pass. She was off her horse, using the dead animal for cover. But she was pinned. He saw a puff of dust from her shoulder, as if she'd been punched. Then another, from her side. She stumbled. She was hit. "No," Eli whispered. He ran, scrambling over the rocks, flanking the men who had her trapped. He was 100 yards away, too far for a pistol. He dropped to one knee, raised Tomas's rifle. He'd seen her shoot. He'd seen her practice. He lined the sights on the man closest to her. He breathed out, squeezed the trigger. The man fell. The others spun, confused. Where had the shot come from? Their rear was supposed to be clear. "Sabine!" Eli yelled, his voice echoing. She looked up, saw him. Her face was a white mask of shock. Eli fired again. Another man went down. Clutching his leg, "Move! Get back!" The attackers were panicked now. Their leader was dead. They were taking fire from 2 directions, and their quarry was proving to be a hornet's nest. "Back!" one of them yelled. "Pull back! It ain't worth it!" They ran, scrambling for their horses, dragging their wounded. Eli didn't watch them go. He ran toward Sabine. She was trying to stand, using her rifle as a crutch, but her legs gave out. He reached her just as she collapsed. He skidded to his knees, grabbing her. "Sabine! Sabine! Talk to me!" Her eyes fluttered open. Her face was pale, beaded with sweat. You came back," she whispered. "I'm here." He looked. She was bleeding, badly. A dark, spreading stain on her left side, just under her ribs. The other shot had just grazed her shoulder. This one was deep. "We have to move." He put his arms under her. She cried out, a sharp, broken sound, as he lifted her. "I can walk." She lied, her head falling against his chest. "Shut up," he said, and he began to carry her. He didn't go back to the main camp. It wasn't safe. He carried her up the rocks, back the way he had come. His wounded arm screaming, his side aching, his lungs on fire. He carried her to the one place he knew was safe, the cave from the storm. He half fell into it, laying her gently on the bed of furs. They were still there, just as they had left them. "Eli," she whispered. She was shivering, despite the heat of the day. Her hand fumbled, found his shirt, and gripped it, a grip of iron. Don't leave me." He was breathing hard, leaning over her, his blood and her blood mixing on his shirt. He looked at her, at the woman who had watched him walk away, who had chosen her pride over the truth. "You left first," he said. The words were quiet, bitter. Her eyes closed. She didn't have the strength to argue. She just held on. He shoved a rock against the cave entrance, leaving just a crack. The sounds of fighting from the ravine below had died, replaced by the terrible sounds of wailing. He had to tend to her. He cut her shirt away. The bullet had gone in clean, but it had not come out. It was in her ribs, somewhere deep. He had no tools. He had no whiskey. All he had was the poultice she had once used on him. He still had some in his pack. "This is going to hurt," he said. "Get it over with," she gritted. He pressed the leaves into the wound. She screamed, her whole body arching off the furs. She bit her own lip until it bled, but she did not cry out again. He bound it tight with strips torn from his own shirt. He sat back, his work done. He was exhausted. He looked at Sabine. She was watching him. Her eyes, clouded with pain, were full of a terrible, raw confusion. She had never been in this position. She had never been the one who was saved. She was the one who did the saving. She was the one who killed, who fought, who led. Now she was just a woman, bleeding on a bed of furs, at the mercy of a man she had tried to send away. She fought the tears. She would not be weak, not in front of him. But the pain was a rising tide, and the shock was a cold ocean. She hated this. She hated this weakness. But his hand was on her arm, steady, warm. It was the only solid thing in a world that was tilting and fading, without meaning to. She leaned into the touch. She craved the warmth, even as she despised the need for it. Night came. The ravine was quiet, too quiet. Eli didn't know who was alive or dead. He only knew he had to keep Sabine alive. The fever set in, just as he had feared. She began to shiver violently. He lay down beside her, pulling her against him, sharing his body heat. She was hot as a skillet, her skin dry. She began to talk. Not to him, to ghosts. No, not the horses," she murmured, her hands twisting in the furs. "Papa, get the gun. Papa." Eli held her. "It's all right. Sabine, you're safe." "Sarah," she whispered. "My name is Sarah." "I know," he said, his voice low. "I know." She quieted for a long time. He thought she was asleep. Then her voice came out of the dark, surprisingly clear, but small, like a child's. He wasn't a raider, not the one after, the one who raised me. Eli went still, just listening. He was a trapper, name of Jedediah. He bought me, from the Kiowa, for 3 beaver pelts and a broken rifle. He saved me. She was shivering again. Eli pulled the last blanket over them. He had a cabin, by a river. He called me his daughter. He taught me to shoot. He taught me to skin a deer. He was kind. Her voice broke. He was kind. For years. And I thought he was my father, until I wasn't a girl anymore. Until I was 15. Eli closed his eyes. He knew this story. He had heard it a dozen times, in different ways, from saloon girls and sod house wives. He said I owed him, for saving me. He said I was his, he changed, or maybe he was just waiting. I was his, Eli, I was his slave. She was crying now, the silent, terrible tears he had seen once before. I waited, she whispered, the words a raw confession. I waited a whole winter. I waited for him to get drunk. He did, on a trade day. He came back, and he fell on his bed. I took his knife, the one he gave me, the one he taught me to use. She was sobbing, her body rigid with the memory. I did it, Eli. I cut his throat. The man who saved me. The man who... I killed him. And I ran. I've been running ever since. I ran until I found this place. She was quiet, her breath hitching. She had never told anyone. She had carried this, a stone in her gut, for 10 years. Eli didn't say anything. He didn't say, "It's all right," or "You had to." He just held her. He held her, his grip firm, his body a shield against the dark. He let her break. He let her confess. He held her without judgment, his own scars aching in sympathy. He knew what it was to kill. He knew what it was to run. After a long time, her breathing evened out. The fever had not broken, but the storm had passed. She was lucid, her voice just a thread of sound, exhausted. She pressed her face into his shirt. I don't know how to love Eli, she admitted, the words so quiet he barely heard them. I don't know how to be with anyone without hurting them first, without the knife. I only know how to hurt. He held her, his heart heavy. He thought of her pride, her rage, her violence, and he thought of her, crying in his arms. They were the same, wounded, scarred. He kissed the top of her head, her hair damp with sweat and dirt. Then let me teach you slow, he whispered. He helped her back down into the ravine. The fever from her wound had receded, but she was weak, leaning on him, her pride a silent, agonizing thing. The adrenaline that had carried him through the fight was gone, leaving only the deep, throbbing ache in his arm from Thomas's knife and a bone-deep weariness. The oasis was a graveyard. The silence that greeted them was worse than the gunfire. Jonah, the big man who had mended their leather, lay near the spring, his arms outstretched. Ilara, the woman who had cared for the children, was slumped against the goat pen, her eyes open to the sky. 3 other men Eli had eaten with in silence, were dead. The survivors, maybe 15 in all, were huddled near the central cave, their faces blank with shock. Sabine saw it. She saw her life's work, her fortress, violated and broken. She pulled away from Eli, using her rifle as a crutch. She looked at Jonah, at Ilara, and her face, already pale, turned to ash. The queen was gone, replaced by the ghost of a girl who had seen this all before. Paz, the boy Eli had defended, ran to them. His face was streaked with dust and tears. Sabine, Eli, they're gone. The riders, they ran. We saw, Eli said, his voice low. No, Paz said, grabbing Eli's arm. Not them, not just them. I followed them. Like you taught me. I stayed on the ridge. Sabine looked up, her eyes dead. What is it? Paz, The ones who ran. They met another group, a bigger one, down in the flatlands. Maybe 20 men, a real posse. They were looking for him. Paz pointed at Eli. Eli felt the blood go cold in his veins. He knew, before the boy even said it. "Corgan, I heard the name," Paz said, his voice shaking. "The bounty riders, the ones who escaped. They told this new posse that the man they wanted, the thief named Mercer, was here, that he joined a tribe of savages. They said they're coming, all of them. They're coming to wipe this place out and take him." The words fell into the devastated silence. The few survivors who heard it let out a collective moan. This was not a victory. It was a pause. The first wave had been a scouting party. The real army was on its way. "We have to go," one of the women whispered, clutching her child. "We have to scatter. Sabine, the oasis is finished." "She's right," another man said, his arm in a bloody sling. "They'll kill us all. We have to run, now, before the sun is high." They all looked at Sabine. She was their leader. She was their queen. Sabine looked at the bodies of her people. She looked at the blood staining the sand by her spring. She looked at the faces of the survivors, broken and terrified. She had built this place from nothing, a sanctuary for the lost. Now it was a trap. Thomas's betrayal had broken the seal. Eli's past had brought the apocalypse. She nodded, a slow, dead movement. "She's right," Sabine whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "It's over. Take what food you can carry. Take the water skins. Scatter to the high rocks. Good luck." She turned, her shoulders slumped, and began to limp toward her cave. She was abandoning her life's work. "No." The word was quiet, but it cut through the despair. Sabine stopped. She turned. Eli was standing there, his face hard. "No!" Sabine's voice was sharp with grief. "Did you not hear him? There are 20 men coming, men who want you, men who will burn this place to the ground to get you. I have lost 7 people. Jonah is dead. Elara is dead. I will not lose the rest." "So you'll run," Eli said, walking toward her. His limp pronounced, "You'll go back to being a ghost. You'll let them take this. You'll let them win. This is not a fight we can win, Eli. This is survival. You, of all people, should understand that." "I understand running," he said, his voice low, intense. He stopped, just feet from her. "I've been running for 2 years. I ran from Silas Cade. I ran from the memory of my friends. I ran from Texas. I ran until I ended up in a hole in the ground, bleeding to death." He looked at her, his eyes holding hers. "You've been running for 10 years. You ran from Jedediah. You ran from your past. You ran until you found this ravine, and you built walls around it." He gestured to the camp, to the terrified survivors. "Now the past is here, Sabine, for both of us. We can turn and run again. We can scatter and let them hunt us down, one by one, or we can stand, right here." "And die?" she shot back. "I won't ask them to die for you." "Don't ask them to die for me," Eli said, his voice ringing in the canyon. "Ask them to fight for their home. Ask them to fight for Jonah. Ask them to fight for Elara. Ask them to fight for themselves." He lowered his voice, speaking only to her. "You and I, we're the same. We know how to hurt. We know how to run. But we're tired of it. I am. We stop here. We stop them. For these people. And for us. Or we'll never stop running." The silence that followed was total. Sabine stared at him, her chest heaving. He was not the quiet, wounded cowboy. He was a man, forged in his own fire. And he was offering her a spine. He was offering her the one thing she had never had, a partner. She looked at his eyes. She saw the betrayal he carried. She saw the steel. And she saw the man who had held her in the dark. She took a deep, shuddering breath. The fog of despair began to clear, replaced by the cold, hard light of her rage. But it was a new rage. It was not the wild, suicidal charge. It was a focused, cold fury. She turned to her people. Her voice was no longer broken. It was iron. He is right, she said. The survivors looked up, stunned. This is our home. We built it from rock and dust. We bled for it. We will not give it to them. But Sabine, the wounded man stammered. 20 men. We are so few. We are few. Sabine agreed. And we are wounded, so we will not fight fair. We will not fight in the open. We will make the canyon fight for them. We will make them bleed for every foot of sand. She turned to Eli. The look she gave him was a transfer of command, an admission, a plea. How? Eli looked up. At the high canyon walls. He thought like an ambusher. We don't stop them at the pass. We let them in. We let them think they've won, and then we bury them. For the next day and a half, the oasis was not a camp of victims. It was an anthill of furious, desperate work. Eli was the strategist. Sabine was the will. Together, they turned the ravine into a death trap. Eli, his arm aching, his legs stiff, led Paz and 2 of the other men to the high ledge above the narrowest part of the ravine, just past the main entrance. For hours, they worked with poles and shovels, loosening a massive overhang of rock and scree, balancing it, holding it back with a few tenuous supports. When they're all under it, Eli explained, his voice grim. Paz, you'll be here. You cut this one rope, and you run. Sabine, her side bound so tight she could barely breathe, organized the others. They created false trails, leading to dead-end caves. They set up hidden firing positions, nests in the rock that were invisible from below. Eli helped train them. The survivors were not fighters. They were menders, goatherds, runaways. He was patient. He took a rifle and gave it to one of the older women, a woman named Beth, whose husband was one of the dead. Your hands are shaking, he said, not unkindly. I can't, she whispered. Yes, you can. He placed her hands on the stock. You don't have to be a marksman. You don't have to hit them in the eye. Just point it at the pass. When they're in the trap, you just pull the trigger. You don't have to kill them. You just have to make them bleed. You just have to make them afraid. He showed her. He showed them all. He showed them how to reload, how to brace, how to listen for Sabine's command. He moved among them, and they, who had seen him as a curse, now saw him as their only hope. He was quiet. He was calm, and he knew how to kill. The romance that had sparked in the storm now bloomed in the shadow of the coming battle. It was not soft. It was tentative, passionate, and laced with the metallic taste of fear. They worked side by side, a true partnership. He would see her stumble, her hand going to her wound, and he would be there, his hand on her arm, steadying her. You should rest. He'd murmur. There's no time, she'd reply, but she would lean on him for just a second. She began to let him in. In the few moments of quiet, as they cleaned rifles by the fire, she would ask, this man, Corgan, he was from your past, with Silas Cade? Eli nodded, his hands moving over the oiled metal. He was the one Cade sold us out to, but the plan went bad. The ranch owner showed up. In the fight, 2 of Corgan's men were killed, along with my friends, Cade and Corgan. They needed someone to blame for the whole thing. The dead men, the stolen money. You, she whispered. Me, I was the last one standing. So I became the thief, the murderer. Corgan's been hunting me ever since. That bounty on my head, it's not for what I did, it's for what I know. She looked at him, at this quiet man who had carried so much betrayal. Her fear, the one she had voiced in the storm, returned. Eli, if we live through this, what happens? He stopped his work. What do you mean? You're a cowboy. This. She waved a hand at the ravine, at her people. This isn't your world. You'll leave. You'll go back to Texas. He looked at her, his eyes serious. He reached out, his rough fingers touching her cheek. This is my fight now, Sabine. This is my home. Corgan is my past. You're my present. I'm not running anymore. Are you? She shook her head, her eyes shining. No, no more running. The night before the battle, the traps were set. The ravine was silent. Every person at their post, waiting for the dawn. The air was cold, full of ghosts and dread. Eli sat alone on a ledge, the rifle across his knees, watching the moonlit pass. He heard her footsteps, light on the rock. She stood beside him. They didn't speak for a long time. "Come with me," she said finally. He followed her. She didn't lead him to her cave. She led him up the canyon wall, on a path he had never seen, hidden behind a fall of dry brush. It led to a small, round opening, barely large enough to crawl through. Inside, the cave was larger. It was high, and a natural fissure in the roof let in a shaft of pure moonlight. The walls were covered in pictographs, old, faded paintings of antelope and men and suns. It was a sacred place. "This is my place," she whispered, her voice echoing in the small chamber. "The place I came when I first found the ravine. The place I came when I was trying to forget Sarah. No one has ever been here." She turned to him. This was her last, final surrender. She was not giving him her body. She was giving him her soul, the last piece she had kept hidden. "Eli," she said, and her voice was no longer the queen's. It was a woman's. He went to her. This was not the gentle, slow teaching. This was not the violent clash. This was something else. It was fierce. It was hungry. It was two souls, starving for life, claiming it one last time before the end. They came together in the moonlight, on the cold stone floor, their movements desperate. A claim. They were mapping each other's scars, each other's strengths. It was a promise and a farewell. After, they lay tangled, their breath ragged in the holy quiet. She was curled against his chest, her head over his heart. She raised her head, looked at him. Her eyes were dark, full of a love so fierce it was painful. "If I die tomorrow, Eli," she whispered, her hand tracing the scar on his side. "Remember this." Dawn. The sound came. Horses. Not a few. A lot. Eli was on the high ledge with Paz. Sabine was across the canyon, hidden in a nest of rocks. Her best 3 riflemen with her. The rest of the camp was hidden. Silent. Waiting. The posse rode in. 23 men. They were arrogant, rifles resting on their saddles. They saw the bodies from the first fight, still lying where they had fallen. "See," a man yelled. "The bounty hunters did half the work for us." The leader, a big man with a dark beard and a cruel mouth, spurred his horse forward. Eli knew him. "Corgan! Mercer!" Corgan bellowed, his voice bouncing off the walls. "We know you're in here, you thieving bastard! Come on out! We got a rope for you, and we'll take that savage queen of yours for a prize!" The posse laughed. They rode forward, deeper into the ravine, right into the narrowest part of the pass, right under the shadow of the ledge. Sabine's voice, clear and cold, echoed from the rocks. "Now!" Eli looked at Paz. "Cut it, boy, and run!" Paz hacked at the rope. The supports gave way. The sound was a deep, groaning tear. Then, a roar. The whole side of the canyon seemed to peel away. Tons of rock and scree fell into the pass. It was not a complete burial. It was a wall. It split the posse in two. The front half, including Corgan, was trapped. The rear half panicked as the way was blocked. "Fire!" Sabine screamed. The canyon exploded. Rifles fired from a dozen hidden places. The posse, trapped in the open, screamed. Horses went down. Men cried out, firing wildly at rocks that fired back. It was a maze of fire and death. Eli and Paz began firing, picking off the men in the rear who were trying to scramble back over the rockfall. The fight was brutal. It was 10 minutes of sheer, deafening chaos. Corgan, his horse killed, was on foot. He was a fighter. He rallied the 5 men still alive with him. "They're in the rocks. Up, get up and flush them out." He saw movement. Paz, too excited, leaned out too far to reload. "Got you, you little savage." Corgan grinned, raising his rifle. Eli was next to him. "No!" He shoved Paz, throwing the boy flat against the rock. The bullet that had been meant for the boy's chest slammed into Eli's thigh. The pain was a white-hot explosion. His leg gave out. He fell, his rifle clattering. "Paz, get back!" he yelled. Across the canyon, Sabine saw it. She saw Eli go down. She saw Corgan reloading, starting to aim again, this time for the wounded man on the ledge. Her rage became a cold, white point. The world shrank to the man, her rifle, and the air between. She did not hurry. She did not think about her side, or the fever, or the battle. She thought of Eli, in the cave. Remember this, she breathed out, just as he had taught her. She squeezed the trigger. Corgan's grin vanished. He looked down at his chest, a look of profound surprise on his face. He dropped his rifle. He collapsed into the dust and did not move. The remaining men, their leader dead, trapped, with death raining on them from above, broke. "It's a trap! Retreat! Retreat!" They scrambled, climbing over their own dead, fleeing back over the rock slide, dragging their wounded. The gunfire stopped. Silence. Then, the groans. The dust began to settle. The oasis stood. Sabine stood up from her position. Her people were cheering, their voices hoarse. Half the camp was wounded, but they were alive. They had won. The silence that fell after the last shot was heavier and more terrible than the battle itself. It was a thick, dusty silence, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the distant, panicked braying of a loose mule. Eli was down. Sabine saw it from across the ravine. She saw him shove Paz to safety and take the bullet. She saw him fall. The world, which had been a cold, sharp point of focus, shattered into 1,000 pieces of terror. She didn't wait. She slid from a rock perch, her own side screaming in protest, and ran. Paz was already at Eli's side, trying to stop the bleeding, his face white with shock. He pushed me. He took it. "He's breathing," Sabine said, her voice rough. The relief was so profound it made her dizzy. She knelt, her hands quick, assessing. The bullet had taken him high in the thigh, a heavy, dark bleed. "We have to move him, now." Together, they hauled him, half carrying, half dragging, down from the ledge. The other survivors were emerging, blinking from their holes like animals after a flood. They looked at the carnage in the pass, at the dead posse members, at the wall of rock, and then at their own. They had lost 2 more. A man named Silas, who had been with Sabine for 3 years, and Beth's son, a boy of 16. The wail that Beth let out was a sound that cut deeper than any bullet. The victory felt like ash in their mouths. They buried their dead that afternoon, next to Jonah and Alara. Sabine stood over the fresh graves, her rifle in her hand. There were no words to say. They had won. They had held the pass, but the cost was unbearable. That night, the camp gathered at the central fire. There were only 9 of them left. Beth, her eyes hollow, spoke first. "They'll send more." "They won't," Sabine said, her voice flat. "Corgan is dead. The posse is broken. They won't come back here." "They will," Beth insisted, her voice rising. "They'll send soldiers. They'll send trackers. They know we're here. This place is a grave. It's not a home." She looked around at the others. "I'm leaving. At dawn, I'm taking what I can carry, and I'm walking north. I'd rather take my chances in the desert than wait here for the next attack." A man with a wounded arm nodded. "She's right. The magic is gone. The truce is broken." Sabine looked at them. The old Sabine, the queen, would have called them cowards. She would have commanded them to stay. She would have shamed them with their weakness, but she was not that woman. She looked at Beth, who had just buried her only son, and she felt nothing but a deep, shared exhaustion. "Go," Sabine said, her voice quiet. "I won't hold you, any of you. If you want to leave, leave. Take food, take water, take one of the horses we captured. Go in peace." The next morning, 5 of them left, Beth and 4 others. They walked out of the pass, a small, sad line of refugees, leaving the oasis behind. Sabine watched them go, her heart a cold stone. When they were gone, only 4 remained: Sabine, Paz, and an older couple named Abe and Sarah, who were too old to run. And Eli, he lay in her cave, on her bed of furs, burning with fever. The roles were reversed. She had carried him here, her own wound pulling, her muscles screaming. Now, she was his nurse. She was his jailer. She was his only hope. The bullet was still in him. She knew it had to come out. She boiled the knife, the same one she had once held to his throat. She washed her hands, her movements methodical, but they were shaking. It was different. Cleaning his first wound. He had been an enemy then, a piece of meat she had salvaged. Now he was the man who had turned back. He was the man who had held her in the storm. He was the man who had taken a bullet for her boy. She was terrified. He woke as she leaned over him. His eyes were bright with fever, but he knew her. "Sabine," he rasped. "Be still," she said, her voice rougher than she intended. "This is going to hurt." He looked at the knife, at the bowl of hot water. He knew the ritual. He just nodded, his jaw setting. "Get it over with." She cut into the wound. He didn't scream. He let out a low, terrible groan, his whole body going rigid, his hands gripping the furs until his knuckles were white. She probed, her fingers slick with his blood. I can't find it," she whispered, panic rising. "Deeper," he gritted, his eyes squeezed shut. "To the left." She trusted him. She pushed deeper. Her knife struck something hard, lead. She worked it, her breath held, sweat pouring down her face. She pulled, and the flattened slug came free, dropping onto the hide with a wet sound. He let out his breath in a long, shuddering sigh, and passed out. Sabine's legs gave out. She sat on the floor, her head in her hands, trembling violently. He was alive. She had not killed him. For 3 days, she did not leave his side. She watched him, just as he had once lain helpless. Watching her, she cleaned the wound. She forced water between his lips. She bathed his face, her touch, once so practical and rough, now hesitant, almost gentle. She would find her hand lingering on his forehead, brushing the damp hair back. She would feel the strange, tight pull in her chest, a feeling so foreign she mistook it for grief. He woke on the 4th day. The fever was broken. The air in the cave was cool. He opened his eyes and saw her, sitting on the stool, her rifle across her lap, watching him. "You're still here," he whispered. "I'm still here." He looked around. The cave was empty. The camp outside was silent. "The others?" "Gone," she said, her voice flat. "Beth, the others, they left. It's just us now. Paz, Abe and Sarah, that's all. The tribe it's just us." He tried to push himself up, but the pain in his leg was a sharp, clean fire. He fell back, hissing. "We're alive, Sabine," he said, breathing hard. "We're alive," she agreed. She put the rifle down. She had been thinking for 3 days, thinking about the fight, about the past. "When I saw you fall," she said, her voice low. "When Corgan aimed at you, I should have run. The old me, I would have run. I would have saved myself, or I would have made a stupid charge, full of rage. That's all I knew. How to run, or how to hurt." "But you didn't," he said. "No, I aimed, like you said. I was still, and I aimed." She looked at her hands, as if they were new to her. "But I didn't know what to do after. When Beth said she was leaving, I let her go. I let everything go. I built this place out of fear. Eli, a fortress to keep the world out. And when the world got in, it fell apart. I don't know how to lead them. Not anymore." "You led them to a victory," he said. "No, we did." She finally looked at him, her eyes raw, stripped of all her pride. The queen was gone. This was Sarah. "You stayed when I would have run. You fought when I would have scattered. You showed them how to fight for a home, not just hide in a hole. I can't lead them without you." The confession was absolute. It was the last wall, the last defense, and she had just lowered it. Eli looked at her. He saw the strength that had held this place together for years. and he saw the terror that had built it. He saw the woman who had cried in his arms, and the woman who had put a bullet in Corgan's chest from 100 yards. He pushed himself up on his elbows, his face tight with pain and exhaustion. "Then let's lead together." She blinked, confused. "Together?" "I'm no leader. Sabine, I'm a cowboy. I don't know how to build anything. I just know how to drift." He reached out, his hand finding hers. It was the first time he had touched her in simple, quiet comfort. "But I'm tired of drifting. You're tired of running. They don't need a queen. They just need a home. We can learn how to build one. Together." He squeezed her hand. "But not just them. Us. Let's lead us first." Sabine looked at their joined hands. His, scarred from ropes and rock. Hers, scarred from knives and survival. She felt a warmth spread from his touch, a slow, steady heat that pushed back the cold she had lived in for 10 years. She nodded, once, a single, final surrender. "Us," she agreed. The weeks that followed were quiet. The ravine was wounded, but the spring still flowed. The great rock fall at the pass was a new, better defense. Eli's leg began to mend. He would walk with a limp, a permanent reminder of the price. Sabine's ribs healed. The ache a dull echo. The four of them, Eli, Sabine, Paz, and old Abe, became a strange, small family. They cleared the debris, they strengthened the caves. One evening, as the air began to take on the first chill of autumn, Sabine walked to the fire pit. She was holding the shirt she had worn in the battle. It was stiff, caked with her own blood and the blood of others. Eli watched her from the cave. She held the shirt up, looking at it in the firelight. It was the skin of the desert queen. It was the armor of the girl who had run from Jedediah. It was a shroud. Without a word, without ceremony, she dropped it into the flames. The cloth blackened, smoked, and then caught fire, the dark stains turning to bright orange embers that floated up into the night sky. She watched it until it was nothing but fine, white ash. She turned and met Eli's gaze. It was done. The next morning, Eli was by the spring, a spade in his hand. Sabine found him turning over the dark, damp soil in a small, protected patch of ground. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice soft. "Paz found a sack, in the posse's supplies." He held up a small cloth bag. "Seeds, corn, maybe beans. We can't live on goat milk and jerky. We need to plant." She looked at the small patch of turned earth. "We are not farmers." "We are now," he said. He poured a handful of the hard, dry kernels into her hand. "We're putting down roots. Sabine, like we said." She looked at the seeds, so small, so hard. It seemed impossible that life could come from them. It felt like an act of foolish, dangerous hope. She knelt beside him, her knees sinking into the cool dirt. He showed her how to make the holes, how to drop the seeds in. They worked in silence, side by side, their hands brushing as they covered the seeds with earth. It was a promise. It was a beginning. The seasons turned. The green shoots of corn pushed up, thin and bright. The ravine, once a fortress, began to feel like a home. One afternoon, late in the fall, Sabine stood near the spring, checking the progress of their small, defiant crop. She heard the sound of the horse and Eli's voice, low and patient. She walked to the central clearing. Eli was standing in the middle, his limp pronounced but his stance solid. He was with Paz, the boy, taller now. His face, having lost its fearful, hunted look, was on the back of the buckskin, one of the horses they had captured. "That's it," Eli was saying. "You're gripping too tight. You don't tell him with your knees. You ask him, gentle. Let him feel what you want." Paz nodded, his face a mask of concentration. He eased his legs. The horse, which had been dancing nervously, let out a sigh and stood still. "Good," Eli said. A small, easy smile touched his lips. "Now, just a walk. Easy." Sabine watched. She watched this quiet man, this killer, this cowboy, as he gently taught the boy who had become her son. She watched Eli, his face softer than she had ever seen it, his eyes proud. He was not the broken man she had found. He was whole. She walked over, her feet silent on the sand. He heard her and turned. The smile didn't fade. "He's got a light hand," Eli said. "You're a good teacher." Sabine replied. They stood together, shoulder to shoulder, watching Paz ride a slow, careful circle. The sun was setting, turning the tops of the red cliffs to molten gold. The air was peaceful. Sabine leaned her head, just slightly, resting it against his shoulder. He felt solid. He felt real. "You still belong to me?" she whispered. It was a callback, a joke, a truth. Eli turned his head, his grin widening. He looked at her, his eyes full of a love as vast and as quiet as the desert. "Always did." He said, "Thank you for listening to this story. I hope it found a place in your heart. Let me know where you're listening from. I always love to see how far these tales travel. If you enjoyed it, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to From Wild West. And please, share your thoughts in the comments. Your words mean the world to me.